Hi, I'm Dominic and welcome to the secret staff meeting where we have big conversations about education. So the format of the conversation is always the same. First question, what were you like at school? Second question, what's the point of school? And then the third question, which is give me 3 things that you wish was taught in school. And we're looking for big conversations, big topics there. So today we're talking to, what's your name, where'd you come from? What are you all about?
Yeah, so I'm Leon Taylor. Once upon a time I used to fall off a diving board for a living, but that was 10 years ago now. I'm on the other side. I commentate for the BBC. So if any of you watch the diving, it's my voice you'll be listening to. But my big passion is around movement, mental health, coaching and mentoring. And that's part of the reason why I'm here today.
Absolutely. And give everybody, I know you've talked about falling off a diving board, and I know that you're too modest to kind of put yourself out there, but give us some of your best moments.
Okay, so I won an Olympic silver medal in 2004 alongside Peter Waterfield in the men's 10 metre synchronised diving. That was actually my 3rd Olympic Games, and it was British diving's first Olympic medal for 44 years.
Oh, wow. Right. Yeah. I didn't know that.
And during my 16-year career for GB, I competed at all major championships, winning medals at all major championships. And of course, the highlight, I guess, of my career is that what was a 20-year dream of standing on the Olympic podium, which happened for me in Athens, the birthplace of the Olympic Games.
Of course, Athens was 2004. So you'd done 2 before that?
I did.
So that would have been, where was 2000?
Sydney.
Sydney.
And Atlanta.
And Atlanta, right.
Yeah, I was 18 in Atlanta and I did my A-levels in the same year.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that was
so 18, 22, 26. Yeah. So you were 26 when you won your medal.
Yeah, and then I retired in 2008 because my body could no longer handle what I was asking it to do. Right. 6-7 hours of training a day, 6 days a week. Nearly, I was 30.
Right.
Yeah, which is granddad years for diving, if I'm honest. That kind of, because you're hitting the water at over 35 miles an hour from the 10 metre, training for hours and hours and hours, pushing the body beyond its limits, and eventually the limits push you back. And by the time I retired when I was 30, I had 4 reconstructive shoulder surgeries on the same shoulder, worn out disc in my lower back, which had put me in chronic pain for over 5 years. Yeah. And the medical team who were looking after me and many other elite athletes told me, made up of sports doctors and everything, that if I was a horse they'd have to shoot me. Yeah, true story. So it was time for me to. I mean, they basically showed me the red
card.
Die
young, okay.
Yeah, exactly. But mind you, I had such a long career. I feel very fortunate. And then that was Beijing Olympic Games, which would have been my 4th. And by that time, there was a young guy on the scene called Tom Daly, of which that was his time. And I think that when you're looking back, it was the perfect time for me to step aside. I then became the voice of diving. I started commentating because I'd built the relationship with the BBC. I was, a mentor to many young athletes at the time, Tom included. And it was a fantastic point for me to step over onto the other side, life after sport, which could be pretty hairy.
Yeah, well, I mean, you hear about it all the time, don't you? So we're going to go on to our first question. Mm-hmm. And I've actually watched your TEDx talk and, as you know, was incredibly impressed by not only the content but also the delivery, and so we will put up the link so that people can watch that.
Thank you.
In that talk you talk about what you were like at school, and I think it would be great to hear about that because I know that a lot of teachers will have kids who aren't dissimilar.
Okay. Those poor teachers.
And they can be challenging.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So I was a pain in the backside from the word go. I was, for whatever reason, maybe it was a traumatic birth, maybe it's other reasons, but for some reason I wouldn't sleep. I needed constant attention, and I was very, very demanding from a baby. My poor parents didn't know what to do with me. They had to start sleeping in shifts, and there's incredible stories of having to, be with me at all times. I would only sleep if I was being walked around the block. So I was very, very, very troubled as a baby, and this continued on into my, my toddler years, and I would need to be constantly entertained. My parents took me to the family doctor. this is late 70s, and they were like, look, is there anything wrong with our child? Because we just can't cope. We've tried and tried and tried and tried. And I don't know what the available labels were back then, but I was labelled as a problem child, and my parents were offered a couple of choices, one of which being sedation. We could take Leon away and sedate him to calm him down, and then you could visit him, or alternatively his name of drugs, so Ritalin, etc., etc. And my mum and dad at that time went, no way, we're not doing that. And they decided to try and find another way. That first way was to see if anyone else could cope with me. So my uncles, my aunties, friends and family, they all failed miserably to look after me. And my parents were at the end of the tether, and they decided that they would try and tire me out. And I started to take part in many physical activities, and ultimately that led into different sports. But in the early days, it was like going to the swimming pool and going to mother and baby gymnastics and like climbing up and down on the sofa and everything. And that seemed to be the movement. Was my medicine, if you like, and they managed to channel me. However, obviously, it wasn't long before I was at nursery causing ruckus, and then that went into infant school and such like. Go on,
And you remember that? So, like for example, in primary school, how did you cope with being in a classroom for?
So let me tell you some of my earliest memories. I remember telling my dad when I was very, very young, Dad, I don't like the name Leon, and he said, why? What's wrong with Leon? And he said, because Leon's always in trouble. Right? Oh, wow. And my earliest memories are being shouted at by teachers, by my parents, by things, because I was unable to control my energy. So there's my mum tells this story, goodness. So I'm leaving nursery, I don't know how old I am, however old you are at nursery, and I've got my two friends, and we're holding hands, and I'm in the middle, and we're, as kids do, like swinging each other, and I get so excited that I pull them both off the ground. Otri, my friend here, I break his arm, and then Tom smashed his head open. And all the parents are at the gate, including my mum, and they watch.
Wow.
I'd spend all my time like this, and unless I was fully engaged or had someone's attention, I was an absolute nightmare, because all that energy would overspill into over-exuberance. I wasn't a nasty child, but I would end up in scuffles and in things because
sort of energy just kind of bundled over
completely.
I mean, because you talk about some of the, you talking about Ritalin, and primary teachers in particular would be very, very aware of that as a drug. They will know that there are children who take that within their own classrooms. And one of the things that I am always very, very mindful of is that if you go into any school in the country, when it's break time, the doors open, children run out, and they always scream. And it's a release of energy. And I would say that is so common. And maybe you're at one end of the spectrum in terms of how much energy you had, but if we're saying that is common enough for even 50% of children to do, it begs the question, are we
designed to sit down all day listening?
No, absolutely not.
And for me, the instructions were sit still, concentrate, and behave, and and
you're basically asking the impossible.
Yeah, exactly. And I did it for a bit, and then I would, the pendulum would swing the other way. And I must admit, as I got older, I became easier to manage, because I was able to express myself differently, and maybe, use, my parents did a great thing, that they used my sporting activities as a bit of a bargaining chip for my commitment at school, and concentrating on my behaviour and doing my best in the classroom, because they knew the importance of education, and they knew how difficult it was to manage me. So they would just use it as bargaining chips. And I used to love doing these activities, and they would say, if you're caught being naughty or missing whatever it was, then we'll take this privilege away. And of course I did, and they took it away, and then they brought it back, and it became this and
it worked for you
still. Yeah, I mean, it was a dance. Obviously they started to instill a sense of personal responsibility and discipline, self-discipline, and creating the circumstances around me where I could operate. And in some ways that was quite stifling, because it's very structured, but obviously the routine was something that I needed in order to not bounce off the walls all day.
Absolutely. I can just imagine so many teachers just nodding heads. I'm thinking of kids that I taught as well, and thinking that actually it was the physical activity when they did They did really mellow out.
So this is the thing. So I'm very fortunate in my position now to visit schools in various capacities, whether I'm delivering an assembly, or whether it's Healthy Eating Week, or whether it's an Olympic project, or whether it's for some organisations where we're delivering programmes to make a difference. And I often go around classrooms in primary school, and the teacher will say, "Oh, keep an eye out for bum, bum, bum." And I'll just have a quick scan and go, "Yeah, there's one." And yeah, that's the other. Like, how do you know? I don't know. I don't know how I know.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is.
Telltale signs.
Yeah, who knows? I can't say, it's because they do this. And then when they kick off, if they do, which would be rare because I'm a guest to the classroom and stuff, but some of them do, I just do this. And I give them my undivided attention, and it's almost like, ooh. I know that's not always possible, and I know that is my thing. But attention, deficit is the problem, but attention is also the cure.
Yeah.
And you can't always do that. You can't sacrifice the entire classroom to go. But it's interesting, isn't it, that there is a way. So I often would have been better off, in short bouts of concentration, because that's all I had. In the rest of the time, I should be in the corner doing star jumps or burpees or running around, okay? And then come and sit down and get 5 minutes of concentration. And then I get topped up, and then I need to go off and whoo. Other children would just be totally happy in the concentration zone because we're all as unique as our thumbprint, aren't we? So so school, it didn't work for me at all because of the requirements. I remember like you must work hard, and I just pushed my pencil into the paper even harder because I just couldn't get this concept of what I was trying to do. And
it's quite torturous, isn't it?
It was. Yeah. It was totally torturous because I was at my most free when I was moving. Yeah. And then it's like, no, you can't do that. And then you talked about the break time, and it used to be like the most amazing release. So I remember it so well.
And that leads us on to our second question, which is, what's the point of school? And there is no set format for how you would like to answer that. But you've obviously already said that, school in a lot of ways was... the reason why I think this is so interesting, because you say, school in a lot of ways didn't serve you very well. And yet you are celebrated as an Olympic medalist, the first medal in diving for 44 years. And so socially, we celebrate that, and you are there, but then in school, you are at the opposite end of that sort of celebration scale, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, so what's the point of school? So for me, it was a hindrance more than anything else because it got in the way of doing what I wanted to do, which was, the love of physical movement and activity. And the learning that you get from sport is incredible, but I understand, the balance. My parents, quite rightly, prioritised education to the point where, as I've already mentioned, they would use my love of sport as a bargaining chip because they knew that, there was no guarantee. There's no guarantee in anything, obviously, but there's no guarantee the sport would take me anywhere. I was a hyperactive youngster and I liked sport, but I wasn't going to make a living or anything like that, or go, I talked about going to Olympic Games every day since I was 6. Who knows whether that was going to happen? If it did, what might even happen after that? But they knew that education was massively important because our society is built around it and has been for decades, for hundreds of years. In fact, I'm not going to go into the history because I don't know it. I was part of a culture. I was in a system where this is what you do at this age. Here's where you go to this place which is close to you. You do these things that maybe they suit you, maybe they don't. For me, they didn't. But I had pressure from society, pressure from my parents to conform to do this thing, and I did my best. And over time, I continued to conform, and I made it through. I got 9 GCSEs, I got 3 A levels, and by the time I got to that point, I was able to navigate the space. I was able to really apply my focus and my discipline, my time management, my tenacity. I did A-levels and Olympics in the same year. And then ultimately I got to the point where, I got through the education system, if you will. And it got easier as I got older. I had terrible challenges with bullying, as I know many children do, because I was different. It was okay when I was younger because I wasn't the bully, but I was so boisterous that, but then it changes in the landscape. So it was really, really tough for me. But of course, being totally removed from the system means that you don't learn socially how to operate and culturally and the interpersonal skills that you would learn in such a setting. Allows you to navigate with different people from different backgrounds, different ethnicity, etc., etc.
And so for you, that was a really important part of it.
I think so. Yeah,
was learning how to work within
Yeah,
a social system.
Certainly, yeah, with the wider social system where people are so different to you. So that person over there hates exercise or sport. Wow, I need to interact with them. How interesting. What other commonalities are there? Whereas if you just spent your time in your tribe, which for me would have been sport, I would have been myopic in my learning.
Absolutely. Right, so that brings us nicely on to which three things do you wish were taught or focused on in school? And I think this is really interesting, again, because there will be those teachers who have the experience of teaching children not unlike yourself. So the first one that you picked out, we've talked about sort of like physical exercise and yoga. Would you like to give us a little bit on that?
Yeah, so my big thing is around using physical movement as a successful intervention to people's health, from children all the way through to adults. And when I say health, I don't mean just the physical health and the well-documented issues that we have in the West and all over the world with increased occurrence of diabetes and heart disease, etc. But the relationship between physical movement and mental health. And mental health, unwellness is a huge problem from children all the way through to the entire population all over the world. It's worldwide problem. And physical movement is a massively important intervention. So moving physically changes what happens in your brain, actually changes the shape of your hippocampus, it boosts your self-esteem, and long-term physical movement actually reduces your biological response to psychological stress. And stress is the precursor to many more serious mental health issues.
And stress is actually recognised as an epidemic, isn't it?
It is indeed, yeah. World Health Organization have recognised stress as an epidemic. So physical movement isn't coming into school and being told you've got to play football in the UK, soccer, or whatever, netball as a girl. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about learning, and we do this through play, and then it gets pushed to the side very quickly. So PE
very quickly.
Very quickly. So PE gets to a point where it becomes structured, and if you don't like it, then you forget your PE kit and sit on the line. And this is what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, my message in my TED Talk is find your movement, the movement that you enjoy doing. And if you're not, physically, stimulated by certain things, then you should find different ways of doing it. So I think that yoga and dance and physical movements along those should be taught from an early age, because learning to move your body in a coordinated fashion, whether you're good at it or not, doesn't matter a hoot. It's just learning how it feels to move your body, because if you start to move your body, you change everything that happens in your brain. And I didn't start practicing yoga till I was 30 years old, and it is the biggest thing that's ever impacted my overall well-being, through the physical movement, the synchronization of breath, learning how to breathe properly, and all the calmness that brings. It gives you a way of operating your human nervous system which will serve you well throughout your life. So we should learn that from the earliest age possible to get those neural pathways firing, so you know what movement feels like, you know what your movement is, whether it's slow, whether it's fast, whether it's a combination of those, whether it's on your own, whether it's with other people. But fundamentally, we spend too much time stuck in our heads and not enough time in our bodies, and that is a huge problem.
Yeah, and one of the things I think is really interesting is that there is once we get into school and we get into that system, there's a real separation between PE and learning.
Yeah.
And I've got there's a good friend of mine called Bryn Llewellyn who runs a company called Tagtivate, and he does English and maths through movement.
Brilliant.
And there is that separation, though, isn't there? In terms of, it's almost like a hierarchy. Like, unless you're actually elite or very, very good at sport, then actually it's just a distraction from your learning.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, where really it should be front and centre from an early age. We learn through play, through experience. This should be massively integrated because, let's use the analogy. So those of you out there who were lucky enough to learn how to ski when you were Diddy, could go off, not ski for 30 years and come back and be there, right? So if we were to teach dance and yoga fundamentally at a very young age, and then a child was then to decide not to do it for whatever reason, and then at 25 years they're on the brink of a meltdown through stress or whatever, they go, actually, maybe I should do that thing again. What do you think the effect that's going to have. That's going to instantly bring them to a much more resourceful place, isn't it? Because those neural pathways, neuroplasticity, etc., is embedded deeply. And even if you don't practice it every day over those years, it will still be accessible
it for
to
life.
you further down the line. Yeah. And it's not going to be so hard to get back into your body when you've spent your entire life thinking on this side of the brain, you know, about
while you're sat in a chair behind a desk, probably looking at a screen.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Right, the second thing, and I really like this one because it's something that isn't talked about at all, I think, or in very few schools, and it's goal setting.
Yeah, so it's almost like when you go to school, you get told what to learn, but you don't get told how to go about achieving anything, right? So it's almost like learn this because it's in the test, but you don't really know how to go about going after things. I mean, I go into schools all the time and I say, okay, what do you want to be when you go, oh, I want to play a footballer, I want to be a YouTuber, I want to be this, and I go, okay, great, how are you going to do that? Like, what's the thing? Oh, I don't know, I'm just going to hope that it happens one day. So there's a systematic approach to using visualization, right? Visualization, the single most powerful capability we have as human beings. If we taught that as a skill, because it's an improvable skill.
And this is something you use as an athlete in your diving.
Yeah,
you would think about what your body's going to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you would take yourself there thousands of times before. So the unconscious mind can't tell the difference between reality and imagination, and so you can actually.
Incredible stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, and all high performers use this. And why should it just be for the elite and the high performers? This should be fundamentally taught from a young age to visualize what it is that you want, to dream, to then capture that, to put it on a vision board. There's so many ways you can do it. So goal setting could be like, well, what is it you want to achieve? But who are you going to become along the way? And that's the thing. It's like, well, I want to fast forward to here, but no, that's not it. This is the thing. This is where it changes slightly. This is where you do all the learning. But how do you structure that in a way?
How do you break that down to stages, mini
exactly.
stages?
Yeah. How do you go about it? How do you utilize the skills that you have? Accountability, tenacity, determination, all of the fundamental attributes that will see you well in this world where the life is not fair. The goalposts always move.
But that's not talked about either, though, is it? About life not being fair?
Yeah, exactly.
Not talked about at all.
No. And I think, I mean, that's getting slightly ahead of ourselves because that's the third thing. So this whole notion of where do you want to go and how are you going to get there and how do you form habits? And what are habits? Well, habits are what you do repeatedly to a stimulus, right? So if I'm aware of every time that happens, I start to do this. Okay, so I've formed a habit around that. How do I now undo that or replace it or something? If you start to be able to navigate that, I work one-to-one with clients, I work as a mentor. A lot of the stuff I do is around habit change. It's like, well, some of our habits, what is it that's sabotaging you? And that's, if you learn how to do that when you were younger, set goals, monitor and direct your habitual patterns.
Well, and the really curious thing is that we all do it to a certain extent on very, very specific things like cleaning our teeth. And every parent will say, oh, you must clean your teeth. And you must hear that sort of, God knows how many, hundreds of thousands of times over, like as a child.
Yeah.
And so we understand on some level how to form those habits, but then when it comes to creating a sort of longer life pathway, we then don't look at those habits at all, do we?
Interesting, isn't it?
Really interesting, and I think you're right. I think working out those pathways would be an absolutely tremendous thing to do in schools.
It just gives you a structure to place things on and to take responsibility.
And also to measure where you are.
Totally.
I'm not there because of X.
So
or I did that didn't work, so let's try Y. Yeah, because which brings us on to the third thing.
I know, we're running into it because they're so related, aren't they? Yeah.
So the third thing that we said that we'd talk about would be failure and adversity. Yeah. So talk to us about that.
Well, we live in a world, whether we like it or not, where we're surrounded by influences which often mislead us to think that success is just right place, right time, instant celebrity, or whatever it is. And it's really apparent when I go into schools and I ask them what are the goals, and it's these things that are influenced by TV, by YouTube, by all these things, and what isn't apparent is how really, I was about to swear then, how difficult it is to get there, and what are the attributes that I need, and one of those is dealing with it when it goes wrong. It's, you know, overused word at the moment, but it's so important, is resilience. It's that grit, that mental toughness, that tenacity, that growth mindset that, okay, that's a challenge. I'm not going to run away. I'm going to square up to it. Great. Another setback. Brilliant. The only guarantee is that there's no guarantees. I'm going to try again. Effort is the road to mastery. You look around and you could be inspired by the success of others, and that could get you to delve even deeper into your reserves of determination. And then when you do get smacked in the face and things happen, you know, you have a strategy to deal with it. You kind of go, okay, and I've just talked about it, you know, the concept, this growth mindset, knowing that there's no guarantee and that everything is changeable and temporary by some of it, you know, and a bad day isn't a bad life, and giving up straight away, but also being you're brave enough to go, actually, this isn't the right path for me, and I'm going to shift over to here, and I'm going to use all of those attributes to move this way, and then I fail over here, and we learn so much through things not working out.
Well, we learn way more, don't we?
Way more, of course we do.
And one of the interesting things, I think, is that we often study successes and we don't study failures. But one of the and so what we've developed is this term which is called growth mindset, and you know, I'm on board with that phrase. But what I think, one of the things I don't think that we talk about is pain. Actually, growth mindset still sounds very, very positive. But what it actually means is, how do you deal with constant failure? Because that's the only way to get better, is to constantly fail and get better. And I guess through your, you know, your sporting career, you've dealt with a lot of pain.
Both physically, mentally, emotionally, and life is very painful. And you can either try and avoid it and get it anyway.
But the media will tell you that children will learn that actually life should be very fluffy clouds and easygoing and have a lovely time. But actually, we don't address that issue of pain.
No.
And when they hit it, it's a big smack in the face.
It is. So, you know, it's strategizing, prevention rather than cure. So it's almost like, what are you going to do when this happens? It's almost like future pacing. So visualize yourself there now, that happens. So you've just, boom, dropped this thing that's really important to you. What are you going to do? You know, and just that consideration of, well, what would my options be? It's thinking here now in a resourceful state, so not like highly emotively charged, like in front of the headlights. Okay, I've still got this, I've still got that, I've got this, I've worked hard, it's a sunk cost, okay, fine. So this is how I'd pick myself up. I would be desperately disappointed. I came fourth at the Olympic Games, I finished fourth at the Olympic Games. There's nothing, when you're a sports person, more painful than that in that setting. You know, injuries and illnesses and all those kind of things, and that is painful to the core. But the strategy will see you through, because you go, okay, next time I will. That happened because of, and that's part of it. So I can either wish there was a magic rewind button, which there isn't, or I can pick myself up. I can, you know, use this dealing with adversity or this failure and this pain. I find the juice in it, because what other choice have I got?
And that is success in itself.
Wow.
So the last thing before we sign out will be, what are you working on at the moment that you're most excited about?
Sure. So, thanks for asking that, because I'm always working on lots of different things. But the reason why we're sitting together is I stepped up in a big way earlier this year and took to the TEDx stage. And I'm for argument's sake, a professional speaker. And I speak widely, corporately on a variety of areas and topics: coaching, mentoring, high performance, mindset, etc. But also, you know, schools and various other places. And for me, a TED talk was easy to avoid, because I didn't want to give my content away, or I used to run this narrative. Anyway, I got called out on that fixed mindset. And so I said, "Oh, you should do a TED talk." Oh, no. Oh, okay, I'm doing a TED talk. And for me, it was like, well, what am I going to do it on? Because I speak on so many different areas that I'm passionate about. I wrote a book on mentoring. I love this. I love that, you know. And for me, it was a huge challenge from a creative point of view to, like, what's my thing? And I worked really hard on it with my coach and mentor, and they kind of pushed me, and it's like, what is this? I worked with a fantastic guy, the curator of the TEDx Clapham I spoke to, and I came up with, you know, the thing that was important to me, that, you know, out of our heads and into our bodies, and it's about finding your movement, and it is, you know, to tackle this problem of mental health unwellness, which is everywhere. And so now, since I've put myself out there, it's funny really, because there's tons of research been released since, and there's lots of people standing up, talking and destigmatizing this whole mental health. And my area, was around prevention rather than cure. Like, it can help, people with more serious mental health. It's like, okay, so what's this intervention? So now I'm developing how do I want to change the world was one of the questions that I was asked by the curator. And I was like, well, I want to change that trajectory of mental health issues. I want to start to make it look more favourable. And I want to give people the chance to do something about it, to intervene before anything happens, to work on stress. So at the moment I'm looking to develop my offering, if you like. So I've got an audience, I have a following, I have a chance to really get this message out there. So my TED Talk is already out there, and I'm encouraging people to watch it, and if it resonates, share it far and wide. And at the moment I'm working with Sheffield Hallam University, who are I'm alumni, and I received an honorary doctorate from them a number of years ago. And I'm working with many key people there. So they have the Advanced Wellbeing Research Centre, doing some fantastic research there into mental health, physical movement and well-being and such. So I'm really excited to start working closely with my old university and start to share, that's going to be accessible. I'm going to be giving away as much content as I can. I'm going to be looking to build a very small team where I've got someone who can really find, what's going on in certain areas, and then I'm going to share it in the way that I did in my TED Talk, to make it accessible, to make it practical, to make it so it makes a difference to anyone and everyone. And I'm excited. Who knows where it's going to go, but watch this space. And any support, any suggestions, any feedback, any discoveries and observations is, please, direct them towards me, because I'm looking to build momentum, continue to build momentum, and like I say, change the world.
Oh, brilliant. Love it. Absolutely love it. Right, well, thanks for joining us at the Secret Staff meeting. We'd love to hear from you about the issues that Leon's brought up. You can tweet us at LitFilmFest. Search for the Secret Staff meeting on Facebook. We'll put up Leon's links to his TEDx talks and anything else that we feel is relevant. Thanks very much for watching.